He is an immortal demon who is accused of slaughtering holy knights and given the death sentence alongside his team of superhuman friends. He wants to find the love of his life back and to prove their innocence in front of the entire kingdom, while protecting it from the evil demons. Meliodas is one of the 7 deadly sins, and alongside the other members, slaughtered dozens of holy knights 10 years ago. After that day, they were all pronounced enemies of the kingdom, and a huge sum of money was to be awarded if someone helped in their capture. Every single person living in the kingdom is scared after hearing the name of the 7 deadly sins, who are considered to be monsters with no conscience. After running away from the kingdom, he laid low for a couple of years, but has finally made up his mind to locate all the other sins once again. He has a pet pig named Hawk and runs a small tavern known as the Boar Hat. One day, while serving food and booze at his establishment, he overhears a bunch of people talking about the 7 deadly sins and speculating whether they are still alive or dead. Meliodas has been hiding the fact that he is one of the 7 deadly sins, and it is easy for him to do that as he looks very young. He overhears a rumor that one of the sins has been roaming around the area, and that he wears a giant armor that is rusty from all the blood of the people he killed. The atmosphere of the tavern instantly changes and everyone seems on edge. Suddenly, they hear a loud clunk of metal armor coming toward them from the outside. Everyone gets scared if they can even smell the odor of rusting metal. They all scream and run away, leaving Meliodas alone in the tavern. The gate to his tavern opens and a giant armor-wielding person walks in. He takes a couple of steps towards Meliodas, but then clumsily falls over, knocking the helmet off of it. Meliodas is surprised to see that the armor wielder is a beautiful white-haired girl who looks extremely exhausted. He carries the girl up and puts him in bed, checking for her vital signs of life. Slowly, the girl comes back to consciousness and asks about where she was. Meliodas informs her about the situation and asks about the reason for which she was roaming around in such heavy armor. The girl introduces herself as Elizabeth and tells Meliodas that she is out to look for the 7 deadly sins. Meliodas seems surprised but doesn't reveal anything about him being their leader. She looks around and is taken aback by the fact that a hawk, being a pig, can talk. Meliodas takes her downstairs and cooks some food for her, which Hawk warns Elizabeth about, but she seems to love it. Suddenly, there is a loud knock at his door, which startles Elizabeth. Some knights are at the door and are shouting to hand over the armor-wielding person, who is suspected to be one of the members of the 7 deadly sins. Meliodas devises a plan and puts bits and pieces of armor on Hawk, then sends him outside to distract the guards while Elizabeth escapes from the back gate. One of the knights, however, notices her, and they all run after her, trying to catch her. Hawk and Meliodas chase after them and are able to push them all off a cliff, while Meliodas grabs Elizabeth and climbs up a tree. She thanks him for saving his life yet again. He asks her about the reason for which she is trying to find the 7 deadly sins, and she replies that her father told her that they were wrongfully framed. She also claims that the Holy Knights have been preparing for an all-out war, which will only put the poor people in more misery than they are already in. Meliodas is taken aback by her statement, but before he could even react, there is a loud explosion and the entire cliffside breaks off. Thankfully, Meliodas is able to save both Elizabeth and one of the knights that was knocked out below. He brings them back up to the cliffside and spots a giant man wearing red armor, who introduces himself as Twigo the Holy Knight. Everyone seems to be scared of him, but Meliodas stands his ground and makes fun of him. Suddenly, he spots Elizabeth's earring and recognizes her as the 3rd princess of the kingdom, who disappeared a couple days ago. He tells her to turn herself in, otherwise he will kill her, and a scared Elizabeth starts running into the woods. Twigo the half-wit brute ends up attacking her from behind. But thankfully, Meliodas is able to save her once again. She decides to turn herself in as she's afraid that if she doesn't, even Meliodas will get hurt. She walks towards Twigo, but he has some different plans and attacks her once again. Meliodas comes in clutch yet again and saves her from the attack. While she was down, he also revealed his true identity as Meliodas, the dragon's sin of wrath, the leader of the 7 deadly sins, and showed her his tattoo. Twigo walks up to them and swings his sword at Meliodas, but suddenly he is blasted back with a cut on his face. He is extremely shocked at this, and suddenly notices the dragon tattoo on his arm. He is scared out of his wits and decides to attack him again, but Meliodas uses his special ability called Full Counter, which reflects any physical damage aimed at him. Twigo is immediately blown away and his armor shatters into several pieces. The rest of the knights quickly run to Twigo to help him, while Meliodas calls Hawk's mom, who turns out to be a giant pig on whom the entire tavern is built. Meliodas grabs Elizabeth and they get on it together. Meliodas tells her that he was going to meet all of the sins anyways for some mission, so she can accompany him and help with the tavern. Elizabeth happily agrees, and her journey begins with the dragon's sin of wrath, Meliodas, the strongest of all the sins. Meliodas, alongside Elizabeth, starts his journey and soon reaches his first destination, which is the small village town called Vanya. This town is famous for its alcohol, and Meliodas gets all of his mead from this place. He explains to Elizabeth that this place has the cleanest supply of water, and that is the reason why their mead is so pure and sweet. While walking around the village, they spot a huge crowd of men, and when they walk past them, they see a sword stuck in the ground. The elder of the village explains that a couple of days ago, a holy knight came to their village and drank their alcohol. After drinking, however, not only did he not like it, but he also insulted their craft and compared it to horsepiss. One of the village kids ended up playing up a prank on him to avenge the insult. He put a bug in one of his drinks, and out of anger, the knight took out his sword and put it inside the ground, stopping the supply of water completely. Suddenly, a boy named Mead walks out of the crowd, and it turns out he was the one who put the bug in the drink of the holy knight and claims that what he did was totally justified. The villagers start criticizing him, and the other children start throwing rocks at him. Meliodas quickly gets him and takes him back to his tavern, where he feeds him and asks for more info on the entire situation. Suddenly, however, they all hear a bunch of noise coming from the village, and Mead rushes to see what's happening. Apparently, two knights came to the town's center and announced that if by sundown the sword isn't taken out, the tax levied on them would be multiplied by 10 times. The entire village groans in defiance, claiming that making mead was their only occupation and now they can't even do that. So how are they going to pay the taxes? The knights, however, don't seem to care about any of this and move over to the side, drinking more of the village's alcohol. Mead runs up to the sword and starts trying to take it out with all his strength. At first, some villagers tell him to leave and piss off, as he is the reason why this calamity came upon them in the first place, but the village elder speaks up for Mead's side and claims that every single villager wanted revenge when the holy knight insulted their craft, but only Mead had the guts to act upon it. This changes the villagers' minds, and a bunch of men walk up to the sword, tie it up with ropes, and then try to drag it out of the ground. The knights sit on the side and keep laughing at the villagers' plight as the rope breaks and everyone falls over. Suddenly, however, Meliodas arrives on the scene and walks straight up to the sword, taking it out with extreme ease. Every single person is shocked beyond comprehension as Meliodas takes the sword and throws it in front of the knights, telling them to run off. The villagers rejoice as the knights get the sword and quickly scurry off. That evening, the entire village is at the tavern, celebrating their victory against the oppression of the holy knights, when suddenly, Meliodas feels something is off. He goes outside the tavern, where Elizabeth is sitting in the moonlight. He looks around and suddenly spots a shining spear coming towards him at an incredible speed. He grabs the spear, but the momentum drags him with the spear, and he crashes through a bunch of houses before he is able to regain his balance and throw it back with a lot of force. By then, a bunch of villagers start accumulating near them, and Meliodas tells them that he has to leave, otherwise they will keep getting attacked. Elizabeth suggests going to the Forest of Dreams, where no one even dares to venture with unknown reasons, and Meliodas decides that it should be their next destination and starts the next part of their journey. The next day, both Meliodas and Elizabeth enter the White Forest of Dreams, which is totally covered in thick mist, making it impossible to see clearly. While walking, they start hearing voices, and suddenly, out of nowhere, a bunch of hawk appear around the real one. They all get mixed up, and now neither Meliodas nor Elizabeth can figure out which one is the real. They all act incredibly similar, and they even speak and act like real hawk. To figure out the real one, Meliodas runs at them and hits all of them on the head. But because the real hawk has been hit so many times, he acts differently, and Meliodas is able to figure out who the real one is. Suddenly, a whole bunch of Elizabeths appear, and they start taking Meliodas' name. He is totally confused as they all look and behave exactly the same. They all try to jump on him, but he quickly jumps away on a tree branch and tells them to do as he says. He makes them all do a bunch of stuff before he tells them to jump in the air. Everyone jumps in the air high apart from one, which Meliodas quickly recognizes as Elizabeth, as he knows she isn't a very good athlete. He grabs her immediately, and the rest of the Elizabeth turns into small troll-looking monsters, who quickly run away deep into the forest. Meliodas and the rest follow them and land upon a giant girl sleeping in the forest. The trolls quickly start waking her up, claiming that someone has trespassed in the area. The girl wakes up from her slumber and asks who dared come inside the forest. Everyone seems to be taken aback by her size except for Meliodas. She grabs Meliodas and looks at him closely before explaining with joy that she had been looking for him for the past 10 years. The name of the giant is Diana, and she is the serpent sin of envy, one of the 7 deadly sins. Meliodas explains to her about Elizabeth's situation, and after hearing him out, Diana declares that she will accompany them on this journey. Meliodas is extremely happy about this, but suddenly dark clouds start forming on top of them, and a loop of lightning binds all of them before the lightning strikes, and suddenly a pink-haired man emerges from it. He walks towards them slowly, claiming that he finally found the sins. Elizabeth seems to recognize him and calls him Gil. She tells him to leave him alone. When Meliodas asks whether she knows him, she replies that Gil is the son of the late Grandmaster Zarathustra who died and used to stay at the palace with her. Suddenly, Meliodas remembers about a kid that he used to teach sword fighting and realizes that it was Gil. He calls to him and asks how he has been, as he hasn't seen him in the last 10 years, and in that time Gil has grown quite a bit. Gil tells Meliodas to shut up as he is not here to make small talk. He walks up to him and asks him why he killed Zarathustra, his father. Suddenly, Meliodas goes silent. He looks at Gil and declares that he hardly remembers anything that happened 10 years ago. Gil doesn't believe him, but Meliodas repeats that all he remembers is that he and the other sinners were coming back from an expedition to report to Zarathustra. But when they opened his chambers, he was impaled on multiple spears, dead. Before they could process everything, there were lots of shouts from outside, and the moment they looked outside, they saw that a huge number of holy knights had surrounded the entire castle. The Sins knew that something was wrong and decided to quickly split up and go in separate directions before they could meet again, but before Meliodas could go away, he was struck unconscious by an unknown assailant, and the next time Meliodas woke up, he was in some unknown tavern. Gil refuses to believe him and tells him that he is going to kill Meliodas anyways. Meliodas in turn looks at Diane and tells her to stay out of this fight before he simply breaks through the lightning chains. Gil looks surprised at this, but soon Diane follows and breaks the binds just as easily. Meliodas remarks that they could have easily broken the binds whenever they wanted, but he wanted to hear him out first. Gil takes out his sword and tries to attack Meliodas, but he simply counters it. Gil disappears and appears behind Meliodas to try and attack him from behind, but Meliodas quickly dodges the attack, while Gil tries to follow up. They both jump up into the air, but Gil gets the upper hand and lands a massive attack, which throws Meliodas down into the ground. He gets up, but before he could regain his balance, Gil appears behind him and slashes him on the back. Meliodas falls over like a rag doll, with blood pouring out of him, and he asks weakly about what happened to the other Sins. Gil replies that one of the Sins is dead, one of them is in prison, and 3 of them are still missing. Meliodas surprisingly gets up and thanks Gil for his help. Meliodas and the rest start their travels to the next city, where the prison of Baste is located, and on the way, Meliodas remarks that his surprise band, the Fox Sin of Greed, was captured and is still in a prison. He believes that with his abilities he could have easily escaped whenever he wanted, but he remembers that the Bait prison is known to be the strongest prison to date. Meliodas starts feeling a little dizzy from the wound that he got, as they still haven't looked after it, so he tells the rest that he is going for a little nap inside, but when Elizabeth follows him, she finds him lying on the floor completely unconscious with blood seeping out of him. She gets concerned and immediately informs the rest. Diane, without thinking anything, grabs Meliodas and runs into the town, asking the townsfolk to help, but because she is a giant, everyone is getting scared and running away from her. Elizabeth runs up to her and tells her to stay here while they find a doctor, but she refuses, saying that even she wants to help Meliodas. With tears in her eyes, however, she realizes that she will never be able to help him this way, and all she could do right now is protect him from any attackers. She tells Elizabeth that more than 10 years ago, while she was traveling through the countryside, she was stopped by a bunch of knights from the kingdom who started making fun of her and telling her that she cannot pass the road. She could have taken care of them easily, but suddenly Meliodas appeared and chastised the guards for ganging up on a girl. She remembers that it was the first time anyone stood up for her, even though he was so much smaller than her. The guards disregarded Meliodas, so he ended up beating them up, and after they ran away, he turned around to ask Diane whether she was scared. Diane tells Elizabeth that it was that moment when she vowed to herself that she would always protect him, no matter what. She lets Elizabeth run into the town and find a doctor, and Meliodas is laid down on the bed for treatment. The doctor is surprised at the amount of damage Meliodas has taken and remarks how miraculous it is that he is still alive. He makes a concoction and feeds it to Meliodas, and he tells the others to sit by him, in case he wakes up. Diane, however, has other plans and decides that she will go to the prison alone, but before she could go, both she and Elizabeth noticed a huge swarm of bugs approaching the city. To Elizabeth's surprise, Diane crouches down and starts screaming that she is scared of bugs as the bugs start raining down acid. Hawk and Elizabeth hide beneath a bridge, but suddenly Elizabeth takes off in the acid rain from the bugs to reach Meliodas. The bugs start chasing her, but Diane overcomes her fear and uses her earth magic to create a bunch of giant boulders from the ground that end up squashing all of the bugs instantly. Diane then jumps up and runs in haste towards the prison, while Elizabeth enters the doctor's house, sitting by Meliodas. Suddenly, the doctor arrives and remarks that they should leave because Meliodas is never going to wake up. Both Elizabeth and Hawk look surprised, but the doctor tells them that the concoction he gave them was actually a blend of very strong poison. Suddenly, an invisible voice congratulates him, and a holy knight appears behind Elizabeth. He apologizes for using underhanded tactics to kill Meliodas and introduces himself as Gorgias. He tells her that he has come here to take her back as the entire kingdom is looking for her. Gorgias takes off Meliodas' bedsheet and notices that he is still holding his broken sword. He thinks that he will take the sword for himself as the heirloom and the trophy for killing the captain of the 7 deadly sins, but when he tries to take it out of Meliodas' hands, he is unable to do so. He keeps trying and uses his full strength, and then he is able to yank it out of Meliodas' hands, but suddenly, Meliodas stands up and grabs the sword again, much to everyone's surprise. The doctor seems to be completely dumbfounded as he claims that Meliodas can't be alive after the powerful poison he fed him. Gorgias is scared out of his wits and runs off through the window. Meliodas and the rest follow him and are able to corner him on the streets. Gorgias raises his hands in the air, faking a surrender, as he already threw some blades in the air while raising his hands, but Meliodas can see through his cheap tricks and is easily able to defend against them. Suddenly, the doctor appears at the end of the street and shouts at Gorgias to let his daughter go unhurt, as he did what he asked him to do. Suddenly, Gorgias disappears and appears behind the doctor, stabbing him in the back. Elizabeth runs towards the dying doctor and tries to help him even when Meliodas tells her to stand back. Suddenly, Gorgias appears from behind and tries to attack Elizabeth, but Meliodas blocks his attack and punches him away. Gorgias keeps appearing and disappearing while attacking Meliodas, but Meliodas is still able to keep up and defend himself. He grabs Elizabeth's hand and runs while defending her from the attacks. He reaches an abandoned building and goes to the first floor, where he slices some of the floorboards. As soon as Gorgias comes inside the room, he steps on the broken floorboard and falls through. Meliodas surmises that Gorgias cannot teleport as he claims he can only become invisible. He goes down to Gorgias and punches him out of the house, but before he could capture him, Gorgias disappears again and grabs a horse, running away towards the prison. Meliodas and the others follow him, and on the way they meet Diane, who looks dazed. She seems to be looking for something but doesn't remember what. She looks at Meliodas and asks how he is healed up before everyone hears a bell, and suddenly Diane looks at Meliodas and sees only a holy knight named Ruin. She attacks Meliodas, who tries to defend himself against her powerful blow. Elizabeth is confused at Diane's behavior, but Meliodas explains that she can't even see him, and that she is only seeing a holy knight who has cast some sort of spell on her. Diane runs after them, which forces Meliodas to take Elizabeth and run away into the forest. On the way, he spots his shepherd and his son walking by, and he screams at them to run as well if they want to live. Thankfully, they are all able to hide behind a small cliff, and Meliodas decides to deal with Diane head-on. He goes in front of her to try and reason, but suddenly, he hears a bell, and a giant holy knight appears in front of him, who introduces himself as Ruin. Meliodas asks where Diane is, but he doesn't reply, instead starts attacking him. From Elizabeth's point of view, she realizes that even Meliodas has been captured in the same spell as he starts fighting Diane. Diane and Meliodas start fighting for real, and Elizabeth and the others are forced to run, as neither Meliodas nor Diane can see them, which makes it very dangerous to stay around them while they fight. Meliodas and Diane carry on with their devastating fight, while Elizabeth tries to protect the kid, and suddenly they hear the bell again, and both Meliodas and Diane come back to their senses. They seem to be confused as to where the holy knight disappeared, but are glad to see each other. Before they could regroup, however, the sound of the bell was heard again, and they were again trapped in an illusion where both of them saw the other as the holy knight and started their fight once again. Suddenly, a new holy knight appears, who introduces herself as Frisia. She claims to be the one who sent the horde of bugs into the town. The small shepherd kid gets scared and starts running away, and Frisia sets all of her bugs on him. The bugs form a giant circle around him and prepare to attack him, but surprisingly, Elizabeth walks straight through the circle, getting pointlessly injured in the process. She finally reaches the kid and tries to console him, but to her surprise and disgust, the kid transforms into the holy knight Ruin. He laughs at her for being so naive and kicks her in the gut. Elizabeth, however, stands up again, which enrages Ruin, and he uses his staff to hit her in the face. Suddenly, he notices that the bell on his staff is missing and realizes that while getting hit, Elizabeth was able to bite the bell off the staff, breaking the spell on both Diane and Meliodas. He walks towards Elizabeth, enraged at her, and tries to punch her while she's on the ground. Thankfully, though, Meliodas arrives there just in time and grabs his arm, twisting it. Ruin hits Meliodas with a staff multiple times and then grabs his limp-looking body up from the ground, but Meliodas simply punches him once in the face, which blasts him off into the prison wall, while Diane grabs Frisia to teach her a lesson. Meliodas walks among the knights, who are shocked to see Ruin in such a bad state. Meliodas walks up to him and punches him in the guts, which breaks his heavy outer armor, surprising everyone. Ruin, however, gets up again and proudly claims that his muscles are his real armor, showing off his washboard abs, which he has definitely gained naturally, without the use of any steroids like any other fitness influencer today. Meliodas, however, doesn't have time for this bullcrap and punches him straight in the gut once again. This time, Ruin starts bleeding from his face and dies in an instant. Diane brings Elizabeth in her backpack and tells Meliodas that the doctor's daughter is also kept inside the prison. All of them head inside. They are able to locate the cell, and Diane grabs the girl, putting her alongside Elizabeth when they suddenly hear footsteps behind them. A tall figure comes into view, which Meliodas immediately recognizes as Ban, and they seem to be best friends. Both he and Ban are extremely happy to see each other, and they start playing around, hitting each other and arm wrestling. Their arm wrestling gets so intense that they end up collapsing the entire base prison, which is supposed to be the strongest prison that was ever built. They all get out of the prison and head back into the town to take the daughter back to her place, when they surprisingly notice that the doctor is somehow still alive and has recovered from his wound. He is extremely happy to see his daughter and apologizes profusely to Meliodas for poisoning him, and Meliodas forgives him. The doctor patches up Elizabeth and they put her to bed. At night, the doctor hosts a giant party for all of them, where they drink a lot of mead and eat good food before getting ready for the adventures ahead. Meliodas and the rest get ready to go to the next city, which is the last known location of King the Bear's Sin of Sloth. The town is known as Necropolis, and not a lot of people visit there because of the bad rumors about the place being haunted by ghosts and spirits. Ban remembers the days when he was younger and wanted to make a name for himself, so he went into the magical forest, where it was rumored that on top of the life tree is a glass of elixir, which if you drink will bestow upon you eternal youth. Ban headed straight into the forest, and because of his skills in martial arts and the ability to steal anything, he was able to pass through the difficulties and find the life tree. He climbed it up and saw the fountain of eternal youth, but before he could reach it, he met the saint of the tree, who is supposed to protect the elixir. She blasts him away with her magic, but Ban gets back on his feet and climbs up again. She keeps blasting him away with her magic, but he keeps coming back again and again, and the final time he gets out his nunchucks and uses them to steal a glass of the elixir. Before he could drink it, though, the girl used her magic to produce a bunch of stems that held Ban in place, and she was able to get the glass back. She turns towards him and asks him why he is here. Ban replies that he wants to taste the elixir as he has heard that it tastes amazing. She asks him why he wants eternal youth, as it can bring a life full of misfortune and you can never get rid of it, but he again replies that he does not want eternal life and that he only wants to see what it tastes like. The girl doesn't believe him and uses her mind-reading abilities to see what was going on in his mind, but to her surprise, Ban is actually just thinking about its taste and is preparing to go back empty-handed. The girl releases him and introduces herself as Elaine, the spirit of the forest and the saint that protects the fountain. Ban and her end up forging a very strong friendship together, falling in love, but one day a giant demon appears out of nowhere and starts destroying the entire forest. Ban tries to defend, but both he and Elaine get mortally wounded and lay on the floor, inching ever so closer to death. Elaine brings the elixir and tells Ban to drink it and survive, but Ban refuses and forces her to drink the elixir while he lays there dying. To his surprise, however, Elaine kisses Ban and transfers all the liquid to his mouth, giving him eternal youth, but dying herself in the process. It has been years since that happened, but Ban never forgave himself. He wakes up and goes out to get some information about the area. He ends up spotting a tiny girl who collapses because of her weakness. He quickly grabs the girl and starts tending to her, but is attacked by his older brother. Ban simply removes the spikes from his body and tells the brother to take better care of her sister, as she is very weak because of not getting enough food. The boy apologizes to him and promises to take better care of her, but suddenly, a different boy who seems to recognize Ban drives his spear deep inside of Ban's chest and calmly asks him about his day. Ban stands there unfazed and calmly asks him who he is, to which the boy replies that he is someone who Ban knows very well. He flies up in the air and starts hinting about the death of Elaine and how it was all Ban's fault. Ban starts getting angry at this and demands to know who the boy is, but the boy stays as cryptic as possible, trying to make Ban even angrier. He rides the spear and tries to attack Ban, but he expertly dodges and tries to punch the boy, but fails. The boy then sends his spear to attack Ban, but he is able to dodge every single attack. Ban finally decides to use his abilities and get serious, but is interrupted by Meliodas, who asks him about his day. Ban replies that he was minding his own business when suddenly this boy came and started attacking him. Both Meliodas and Dian look at the boy and exclaim together that it is King, the bare sin of sloth. Ban looks at them with disbelief as King used to be a fat man, not a petted boy. Both Dian and Meliodas, however, are sure about it and call him, but King decides to fly away without saying a word, confusing them all. Ban returns back to the tavern and he also brings the girl and his brother back to feed them some good food that he cooked. Everyone loves his food, and then he asks about Necropolis and whether the kids have heard about it. The little girl replies that people now think it is just a legend and superstition, but the old man who lived beside her house used to say that to enter Necropolis and interact with the dead, you needed to share a very strong memory with them, which would trigger the entrance. Ban asks them to guide him to the entrance, which they happily do. They take Meliodas and the others to the alleged entrance and stand outside of the circle. Ban instantly remembers the fond memories of his with Elaine, and suddenly the winds start rising and they start getting transported to a different world. Before they disappeared, though, King, who was spying on them from a distance, was also able to enter the circle and get transported with them. While looking around in this new place, Ban suddenly spots a girl in white floating away. He immediately recognizes her as Elaine and runs after her. King spots Ban, and he also takes after him. Ban keeps running in the direction where he saw Elaine, but King quickly catches up to him and asks where he is going. Ban ignores him and increases his speed, but King is easily able to fly faster and blocks his path. Ban tries to get a hold of him, but King dodges all his advances. Ban then tries to hit him with a backhand punch, but King uses his magic pillow to block his attack, and before Ban could react, he used the pillow to hold him in place. Ban asks him about the reason why he is angry at him, and King explains that 10 years ago, when they got accused of staging a coup, King decided to return back to the magical forest, but when he reached there, all he found was a charred mess. Everything was destroyed, and someone killed the Saint of the Life Tree and drank the elixir of life. He looks at Ban accusingly and screams at him that the Saint of the Tree was his sister. Ban looks at him and realizes that King wants to kill him to avenge his sister. Ban asks King how is he going to kill him as Ban is immortal. King mocks him and says that he has several ways of killing Ban, but he wants him to suffer and repent for what he did. King summons his spear and stabs Ban in the chest while using his special skill, fossilization. Ban slowly starts getting converted into a rock, and King, expecting him to panic, is shocked to see that Ban seems to be at peace with himself and gets frozen with a smile. Meliodas and Dian, on the other hand, encounter a holy knight named Gila, who also entered the necropolis by killing herself, and he starts attacking them. She seems to be gaining the upper hand again and again, somehow overpowering both Dian and Meliodas, blasting them away with her explosion magic. King turns away from Ban and curses him to stay in the necropolis for eternity, but he senses something behind him and turns around to see a light hovering around Ban. King senses Elaine around him and he screams out her name, asking her to show herself, but the ethereal Elaine moves towards the frozen Ban and kisses him lightly, breaking the fossilization magic and freeing Ban. King is at a loss of words and kneels down, begging Elaine to show herself, asking for forgiveness for leaving her alone to defend the tree for hundreds of years. Ban looks at Elaine and tells her that he's going to take what is rightfully his, even if it's dead, and then runs off towards the explosion. He reaches just in time to see both Dian and Meliodas struggling against Gila. He uses his special skill called Snatch, which binds her rapier, but she uses the explosion magic to blast Ban away. They again start fighting together, but even though they are working as a team, Gila seems to be better at it and is able to read their moves expertly, dodging their attacks and delivering their own. Meliodas tries to attack her, but she dodges and kicks him back. Ban tries to sneak in a punch, but she simply stabs him in the neck, but suddenly King stabs Ban in the back, and the spear comes out through the front, hitting Gila, which sends her flying off in the distance. Gila emerges from the rubble and faces off against King, who is still very comfortably stabbing Ban in the back. Gila tells King that she is disappointed in his skills as she thought he would be more powerful than that. She uses her sword to summon a bunch of small explosive balls and fires them towards him, but he simply uses his spear in a spinning motion to get rid of all of them. She gets ready to fight and tells them to fight 4-on-1, but King cuts her off and says that it is going to be a 1-on-1 matchup between him and her. Both Ban and Meliodas immediately sit down to enjoy the show, and the fight begins. Gila the cocky bitch tries to make cool statements, but King is an alpha male and cuts her off mid-sentence by sending his spear flying towards her, cutting her on the face. He then mocks her for not being able to dodge his attack. He attacks her again, and she barely dodges, which leads to King landing a barrage of attacks on her, which she struggles to block before jumping on top of a hill and starting to produce a giant explosive ball. King converts his spear into thousands of small spears and is not only able to destroy the ball, but also ends up injuring Gila in the process. He turns around from the scene to talk to the others, but surprisingly Gila is still alive, and she quickly attacks King while his back is turned, but Meliodas jumps in between and is able to use full counter, which blasts Gila away into the real world. Now that their job here is complete, all of the others also start disappearing, and they wake up in the real world to find Gila standing unconscious. Meliodas ends up binding her to a tree and drawing on her face before deciding that he's had enough and moving on with the rest. While sitting by a lake, Elizabeth asks the king about the source of his powers, as all the rest of the sins together were having trouble dealing with Gila, but he alone defeated her so easily. King explains that none of the sins were using their full energy. In fact, they were only using a tiny percentage of their true power to fight against her. He turns around and asks them about their sacred treasures. Diane says that she lost hers, Meliodas replies that he sold his, and Ban replies that his got stolen. King looks at them in awe and can't believe that all of them have lost their sacred treasures. Elizabeth seemed confused, so they explained to her that a sacred treasure is a heavenly weapon with special powers that lets the sins use their full potential. He tells her that with their sacred weapons, each of the sins will be 100 times as strong as they are right now. He tells them that they need to locate the treasures as soon as possible if they even want to try and save the kingdom. The next day, they depart for the next town, which is famous for hosting a giant fighting tournament every single year. According to the rumors, a giant warhammer has been seen in this city, which was forgotten by a giant girl some years ago. King believes that the hammer is Diane's sacred treasure, and they all enter the city to find it. For obvious reasons, Diane is forced to stay behind, so to keep her company, even Elizabeth agrees to stay by her side. They enter the town and realize that the tournament is about to start, which excites both Ban and Meliodas, who really want to compete against each other. King seems reluctant, but an old man informs them that one of the special prizes is a giant hammer, which is embedded on the side of the hill. This makes up their minds, and Meliodas enters all three of them into the tournament. They enter the tournament, and the first match is going to be a battle royale, where the remaining 8 fighters will be selected for the finals. Meliodas and Ban are both having an incredibly easy time defeating all these mortals, and there are some other men as well who seem to be super strong. There is one girl in particular named Matrona who fights with a cloak and is able to defeat 10 men at once, which surprises everyone. Finally, the final 8 fighters are selected, and they are instructed to draw sticks to decide their opponent. King is paired up against an old drunk dude. Hauser, a holy knight, is paired up against a giant fat idiot who used to win these tournaments. Ryamor, another holy knight, is paired up against Matrona, and finally, Ban is paired up against Meliodas. The first battle is Matrona against Ryamor, which everyone thinks Ryamor will easily win, as at the end of the day, Matrona is still a petite girl. The announcer asks her to remove her cloak to show whether she has any weapons, which she does. Meliodas and the others are shocked to see that the girl inside looks familiar and is wearing a tavern's uniform, but it is not Elizabeth. The fight starts, and Ryamor instantly starts using his special ability, which encapsulates him in a bubble that is virtually indestructible. Matrona keeps attacking the bubble, but it has no effect on it, and the bubble keeps growing, which pushes Matrona to the very edge of the ring. Matrona decides that it's time to get serious, and she uses an incredibly strong punch and breaks through the shield, which utterly shocks him. She then runs towards him and delivers a powerful uppercut to his face, which sends him flying off of the cliff. Matrona then walks toward Meliodas and the others, and King recognizes her. She is Diane. Meliodas, however, fails to recognize her, which angers Diane, and she was away. King follows her and calls her name, which she responds to, confirming his suspicion. He asks her what happened, and she replies that she and Elizabeth were out in the forest to get some mushrooms when they suddenly found a giant mushroom, which sprayed something on them and shrunk them. King informs Meliodas about it, but he tells them to just relax, as it should go away automatically. The next match turns out to be King, the drunk old guy. Everyone thinks that King will win, but Meliodas and the others have never seen King fight without a weapon and are not sure what is going to happen. The fight starts, and King tries to attack the old dude, but ends up tripping and falling over. He tries fighting him, but the old guy hits him on the head. King then tries using some sort of magic, but before he could do so, he gets pushed out of the ring by the old dude, who wins the fight fair and square. Imagine the embarrassment. The next match is Hauser, the holy knight, against the fatty. The fight goes as you would expect. Fatty is unable to do anything, and Hauser tells him to just admit defeat, but Fatty refuses to, which forces Hauser to use his special ability, which sends him flying off the cliff. Finally, it's time for the final battle, which is between Ban and Meliodas. Both of them enter the ring, and they seem really excited to fight once again. Ban remembers that when the magical forest was burned, he turned himself in for the crime because he didn't want to live with the guild anymore. He wanted to suffer, so he made the soldiers try all the methods of execution on him, but none of them worked. Finally, one day, Meliodas arrived at the prison and went to check on Ban. He told Ban to move out of his cell, but Ban refused to. He thought Meliodas was just another ordinary kid and told him to try to make him move out of the cell. This was followed by a fight between the two, in which Meliodas was the victor, and he threw Ban out. Ban was so excited and happy to find someone he can go all out with that he agreed to become a member of Meliodas' team. Meliodas and Ban start their fight, in which Meliodas lands the first punch, which almost throws Ban out of the ring, but he recovers and their back and forth begins. Everyone seems to be getting concerned about the two because they are fighting with monstrous power and people are surprised that either one of them hasn't died. After a point of time, Ban starts using his snatch ability to steal away Meliodas' physical power to fuel his own, and Meliodas' punch starts becoming weaker and slower. However, still Meliodas is strong enough that when their punches meet, Meliodas' punch breaks through Ban's punch and hits him in the gut. Ban gets up again and lets Meliodas hit him as many times as he wants, and slowly all of Meliodas' powers are sapped from him, and he falls down on the floor, whereas Ban feels full of energy and unbelievable power. Ban gets ready to finish Meliodas with one final punch while he is still on the ground, and even though everyone protests, he still punches Meliodas. When the dust clears off, everyone is surprised to see Meliodas standing in the ring, whereas Ban has disappeared. Suddenly, people spotted Ban hundreds of meters away, stuck on the cliffside. People are shocked as to how Meliodas did that, but Diane tells King that she saw that the moment Ban punched him, Meliodas grabbed his arm and broke it, then got up with a weird mark on his head and punched Ban away. Meliodas walks out of the ring as if nothing has happened and tells Diane that she has to fight next, and her fight is against Hauser, the Holy Knight. She gets inside the ring and the fight begins. Hauser chases her and tries to use his uppercut with wind magic, but Diane is able to dodge every single one of them. Hauser thinks that she is dodging because she is afraid, but he doesn't know that she just doesn't want to ruin her dress. Hauser corners her and punches her, but she is able to easily stop his punch. He backs up and uses a tornado spell on her, which hits her and ruins her dress anyway. He then again uses his wind magic to throw Diane up in the air, but Diane uses her conversion ability to transform her body into metal and falls on top of Hauser, knocking him out. She quickly apologizes to him, saying that she forgot to hold back, and moves away. The next fight is between the old drunk guy and Meliodas. The fight starts and the old drunk guy asks whether he is the son of the real Meliodas, to which he replies that he is the only real Meliodas. The old guy seems surprised, as when he was young, Meliodas also looked exactly the same. He reminds Meliodas that he is from the kingdom of Danafal, which used to be the place where Meliodas lived, but then the rumors said that Meliodas destroyed the entire kingdom and ran away. The old dude keeps getting angry and throws a bunch of fireballs at him. Meliodas doesn't even defend against it and lets him hit as many times as he wants, while the old guy releases all his pent-up anger. Finally, he produces a giant fireball and throws it towards Meliodas, who merely uses his nullifying magic to nullify the fireball. He looks at the old guy and tells him that he never wanted to hurt anyone, and that he always tries to protect the kingdom and his people. The old guy runs up to him and starts crying while hugging him. He claims that he never believed the rumors, but he wanted to hear it from him. He then turns towards the announcers and tells them that he yields the match, making the finals between Diane and Meliodas. Diane and Meliodas get in the ring, and as soon as the match begins, Diane punches Meliodas into the ground. That's it for this video. Make sure to like and subscribe for part 2 and watch this next video on screen.